Welcome to Pineapple Support's webinar on Boundaries, the True Power in BDSM. I'm going to be your teacher instructor today. My name is Nicki Line, or Therapist Nicki, or the Healing Unicorn, depending upon which avenue you're going to look me up as. I've been working with Pineapple Support for a little bit, and we are going to be talking about the boundaries with power exchange. So the power exchange lifestyle without limits can sound super exciting. However, we all have limits, and we need to understand our limits. And our limits are boundaries, and they keep us safe in areas everywhere in our life, even in our, extra fun, sometimes in our total power exchange lifestyles. And the same is true for any successful relationship. So during this, so the outline is going to be, I'm going to go over definitions of particular words that I use. Sometimes I use things interchangeably. I'm going to go over types of boundaries, how to set boundaries and how they are applied in certain types of relationships, what looks like a boundary in power exchange or BDSM, and what's the difference between other things that we hear, such as like rules or punishments, things like that, and also how to set and collaborate to make this scene or this type of relationship work for you, and if there are consequences for those particular boundaries that are set when they're crossed. Why has it been paused? Okay, so who am I? I am a licensed mental health counselor in the state of Florida. I also hold a license in the state of Georgia. I'm a certified sex therapist with niches in kink and polyamory. I'm a kink certified aware therapist. I received that certification back in 2017, 2018. I'm also a geek certified therapist. I am a therapist with Pineapple Support. I run the morning motivational support group. It's not a morning, it's just Monday. I'm having challenges right now. Please bear with me. I have been in the power exchange lifestyle or lived it or seen it or experienced it for about 20 years or so. So that's kind of how the heck do I know what I'm talking about? That's how. I already went over the outlines. So definitions. So for the sake of this particular webinar, when I talk about BDSM, I'm talking about bondage, discipline, domination, submission, sadism, and masochism. Sometimes I use them interchangeably with power exchange, or I will say lifestyle. That's what I'm meaning when I say these things. Boundaries. Boundaries as far as in relationships is a dividing line that defines who you are as an individual and how you will interact with others. And I'll be giving other definitions as we go on. And if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in chat or in the Q&A section, and I will try to address them as we go, or I can address them at the end. Either way, depends on when I catch them. Also, if I say I have clients or I have seen people, understand that I am changing details. So I'm never going to say names. Let's say if they were in the military, I'm probably going to say they're a doctor or something. So everything is going to be mixed up when I give examples. So I'm not violating HIPAA when I'm saying these things. I also speak a lot in movie quotes and song lyrics. So if anything needs to be explained, just let me know, and I'm happy to go over it in a more extensive explanation for that. So what are boundaries? Boundaries help us understand, again, where you end and another begins. So to make that clear, you are a unique and autonomous person and not an extension of someone else. And I understand that in the power exchange lifestyle and the BDSM lifestyle, if you are a submissive or a slave or tag S type label to that, you are seen as an extension of your D type. And when I say D type, that's domination. When I say S type, that's more of a submissive. So I understand that. However, you are human and you do have unique needs, and you are a person first. before that. Boundaries help define who you are, also can help you define what type of S-type or D-type or switch you would like to be. They define what a person is responsible for. So what are you responsible for in this type of relationship? It's basically yourself, which you can control. So these are things like your own thoughts, your feelings, actions, words, your body. So we're going to be also looking at internal versus external locus of control later on in the presentation. It also helps you set limits. Everybody has limits. It's very rare you're going to hear somebody that's like, I have absolutely no limits whatsoever. Even though some people say that, generally most people do. They provide physical and emotional safety. So especially physical and emotional safety in the power exchange BDSM lifestyle. These are particular acronyms that people have used over the years. They have evolved and changed, whichever one you choose to use. So RAC is risk aware consensual kink. SSC is safe, sane, consensual. PRIC is personal risk informed consensual kink. And the 4 C's are caring, communication, consent, and caution. Now, to me, like in the spirit of the rule or the spirit of the law, or how all these things are done, they're essentially doing the same thing. They want you to understand what you're engaging in, what are your limits for that, and to be informed. And also you need to be giving consent and communicating with whomever you are choosing to engage in this with. So that's why this is important also for, the boundaries part, keeping yourself safe. And ensure you focus on what's important. There are several types of boundaries. When I give just a flat out mental health, this is boundaries. We go over all of these. So physical boundaries include your body and the space surrounding it. So your personal space. Define who is allowed to touch you, in what areas, including the levels of physical intimacy and sexual practices. What goes into or on us, such as food, drink, fluids, you name it. You can get really descriptive here, but especially physical is really important. Actually, all of these are really important in the BDSM lifestyle, is even in like regular relationships. Psychological information about yourself. So that includes thoughts, beliefs, values. These include topics of conversation or anything that occupies your mental space. So whatever kind of has rent space in your head. Who knows about your inner life and how it is started or how it is shared, if at all. I like to do a boundary house exercise with my clients where we do like this really simple floor plan of you have a living room, you have a kitchen, you have a bedroom, and of course you have like your foyer and the outside. So I give explanations such as, I'm not going to let the mailman or the UPS guy pretty much off my porch because I don't know who they are and they don't really know me. They just know they're delivering something to me. If I have people over for just an instance to chat real quick, they're probably going to stay in the foyer, or they may chill in the living room where we can watch TV, but I'm not going to let them like roam around the rest of the house or go into my kitchen. So then you'll have people in your life that you're like, yes, you can go in my kitchen, mi casa, su casas, and you can go get my food, or you can go get food out of the fridge. You can go do this or that in the house without really needing permission or asking. Other people are bedroom friends, and these friends or individuals in your life that know a lot of things about you, like really deep, intimate things. So I have them plot all the individuals in their life right now, where they are or how they perceive them. We take a look at it. And if there's too many people in the bedroom and in the kitchen, your boundaries may be really loose or really weak. If there are too many people in the living room, in the foyer, or outside the house, your boundaries may be really rigid. So we start to look at who are people you want closer and who are people that you want to set up more boundaries with, so they don't have as much access to you. Emotional boundaries. These will include your feelings and their ability to be leveraged and manipulated. This includes emotional blackmail, guilt trips, etc. Also including not taking on others' distress or expecting them to take on yours. And this is similar to psychological boundaries. Who knows about your feelings? How are they shared, if at all? These constitute emotional boundaries. Spiritual boundaries include your ability to choose your own religion, your higher power, your spiritual life, anything in that sphere of influence. Who knows about it? Who do you deem appropriate to know about it? And how is it shared? You don't have to share everything or anything if you do not want to. And then we have general, which is anything that defines or differentiates you as separate from others and them from you as a boundary, and anything needed to keep you healthy and safe interpersonally and in the world constitutes a boundary. And in the case of the power exchange lifestyle, these can include hard limits, soft limits. Hard limits are those things that are non-negotiable or not crossing for any reason. Soft limits are those that can be collaborated on or negotiated with, such as this relationship is really important to me, and these are things I'm willing to work on. Also in the power exchange community with hard limits and soft limits, these are they could be physical things you want to work on, psychological things you want to work on, emotional things you would like to work on. And there's a joke that says most hard limits become soft limits eventually, which can be true. It can also not be true at the same time. You get to choose whether or not you want to do that. If you would like to evolve your boundaries, which is completely possible and doable, which we will get into later in the webinar. Also, safe words are boundaries. The red, yellow, and green, those are all check-ins with boundaries. Okay. So what happens when we don't have boundaries? It creates a sense of resentment. So if people are walking all over you, like your boundaries are really weak, could lead to resentments, could lead to you feeling overwhelmed because you're overextending yourself, feeling taken advantage of, can increase anxiety, depression, codependency, people pleasing, which is part of codependency. It's also part of, feeling taken advantage of, feelings of guilt for taking time for yourself, not knowing who you are. So these are all consequences or natural consequences of not being able to define those boundaries. So different boundaries in BDSM, like we've talked about before, you have hard limits, soft limits. Boundaries increase trust. That's what the purpose of boundaries are. And so we have a sense of self and autonomy, and we are able to connect in a healthy and safe way that is healthy and safe for us, to how we define it. It will help you identify your power exchange identity. So if these boundaries are starting to feel like we were saying before, like anxious or depressed, or kind of feel like something's not right, maybe we need to look at that. Maybe something is evolving in you that we need to change. Written and verbal contracts, they have boundaries and guidelines and rules and rituals written in there. So it's very clear cut. So it's either written or it's verbal. I like written. So we get a sense of here, this is what it is. I have my clients do that. In fact, I have other contracts that I will show in a minute. And again, safe words are definitely boundaries. And what boundaries are not? This is important to define. They are not demands. So we're not demanding something of somebody else. We are asking. They are not ultimatums. And we'll go into what ultimatums are a little later when we look at consequences. They are not mean. They are for you to feel safe and for you to be able to be like, okay, I need this for myself. And understanding that if someone else isn't liking the boundary, that's not your responsibility to caretake for them with that. So even going back to demands, the primary purpose is to take care of yourself, not to control people. And I understand the whole BDSM, we're looking at gifting power. The S type is gifting power to the D type to take control over that. And again, that is negotiated and talked about so we can set those safety guidelines. Typically, we ask someone to change their behavior, but a boundary is a request. And it's a way to communicate your needs and expectations. It is not a demand or an attempt to force someone to do what we want. Demands do not foster connection. They are often met with resistance. And that's the same with an ultimatum. They're usually made in haste and they're made in anger. And they're usually met with resistance. In my experience, ultimatums do not work. And we'll go into that later. And there's this great quote about how boundaries are not mean. Compassionate people ask for what they need. They say no when they need to. And when they say yes, they mean it. They're compassionate because their boundaries keep them out of resentment. And then we'll go down to selfish. So here's where I like to define selfish versus self-full. So selfish is you're putting your wants before others' needs. Self-full is putting your needs before others' wants. The boundaries are meant to communicate your needs. And they are not fixed. They are evolving and they can change. They are also not rules. Rules are something that control somebody else, like it's for somebody else to do. A boundary is something you set for yourself. So a good example is for a boundary, I do not scene with potential partners on the first meeting. This is a me, I do not. Rule, I cannot scene with a potential play partner on the first meeting. So that you hear the sound difference, you may have negotiated this particular rule with a play partner or with somebody else. So we have decided together, I'm not going to play on the first date for whatever. Are there any questions so far? Nope. Okay. So now that we've kind of laid out what they are not, how do we set boundaries? Because it's hard, especially if you've never set them before or you don't set them very often. You don't know what your boundaries are. We need to learn about that and learn how to set them with somebody else. So let me go back to the other one. So I like to base this off of Vicki Tidwell Palmer's 4-step formula for setting boundaries. There's also other formulas in DBT workbooks. There's non-aggressive communication. It's all very similar, but I like how Vicki lays it out in the 4 steps. And they have questions for you to start like clarifying what your needs are. So you know what the boundary you need to set. So clarify what you need and want. Identify your boundaries. Implement your boundaries and fine-tune them. So clarifying your needs. What boundary-related problem am I experiencing? So these are questions that you would ask yourself. So if I'm having certain feelings, what is missing, or what is this need that's not getting met? What are my unmet needs? How do I feel? What outcome do I want? What do I want to accomplish with my boundaries? So when we're asking these questions, the first one, understanding the issue due to a weak, rigid, or inconsistent boundaries give you important information about what you need and want. When describing, try to be specific and stay focused on one problem and issue at the time. Sometimes we kind of spiral out like, well, if I do this, then this will happen, then this will happen. We don't need to do the spiral and the what ifs. That's anxiety talking. We need to look at what the actual issue is and be specific. So let's say I am feeling, or something is feeling off in a power exchange relationship. I might not be getting maybe the instructions that I'm needing to be able to perform a task properly. So what are the unmet needs? I'm needing instruction, like I'm needing a way to go. How do I feel? This makes me feel really anxious. So I feel like I'm not doing a good enough job, that I'm not good enough, because this anxiety is always telling me like you're going to do it wrong. What outcome do I want? What do I want to accomplish with my boundary? So once I've identified like my feelings, I need to put them together and figure out what is the outcome. The outcome I want is to be able to perform this task to the best of my ability. And I'm going to be needing clear instruction and clear guidance. So my need is I need clear instruction and guidance to perform this task because I want to feel like I'm doing a good job when I am given a certain task or chores or what have you to do. And I may be doing a lot of stuff from the S-type side, but there are boundaries that D-types and switches can set as well. So I'm going to try to be mindful and use other examples from the different types of communities. And if there's one that you would like an example of, please put it in the chat or the Q&A. And with this like blank, it kind of gives you a template of what to fill in. So you're not focusing on the complete outcome yet. I only want you to look at the need and how you feel in the beginning. So I'm needing this because I'm wanting to feel accomplished. I'm wanting to feel connected when I do these things or when these things happen. And being able, like another example is I need respect. I want to feel at ease, respected and valued when I'm together with name, partner, or person. And now that we've identified what the boundary and what the need is, now we need to look at the outcome. So when we're identifying boundaries, what are the options? It is important to identify as many options as possible on how to set these things. Don't limit yourself to what you think is possible or what seems like a good solution. Brainstorm without judging or editing. Try to identify like 5 to 10 options for each boundary that you're wanting to set. So examples, let's say someone keeps showing up late to an event. There are several options. You can stop hanging out with them. You can get together less frequently. Only get together when they have plenty of free time. Do not go to anything with a firm start time, which could be going to the movies, going to like a show or anything like where you have to be here at X, Y, and Z. Tell the person that you're meeting 30 minutes early before the actual start time. Arrive late yourself. Live with that they're going, just accepting that they're going to be 15 minutes late or more. Start without them and stick to the firm end time. That's some boundaries that I set in my own clinical practice. I have a boundary of if a client is about 20 minutes late to a session and they haven't notified me ahead of time, I will terminate the session and tell them, hey, this is a no-show. And they know ahead of time, like this is all in the contract that they sign. So they're aware of the boundary and they're aware of the consequences for that. Ask them to be on time. Do nothing and accept that that's just who they are. So those are a multitude of options, and you can choose which one that you feel is right for you Or if you want to negotiate and collaborate with the other person, be like, hey, this is what I need to start doing for myself. Because again, this is a request of the other person. You're not demanding this of them, and you're not setting a rule. You're just saying, hey, for myself, because I don't want to miss the movie. I'm just going to use a movie example. I don't want to miss the movie. So if it's a hard time for it to start and you're not here by then, I'm going to go in the movie. I'll let you know what row and seat that I'm in so you can join when you get here. And also after the options, you need to look at what is in the sphere of your control. So this is where we're getting into locus of control. So if you look at internal locus of control is I control what's going on. External is everything else dictates things for me. I have seen people who have really good boundaries that are healthy boundaries. It is very much internal locus of control. I can make these things happen, or I choose not to make them happen, instead of, well, I can't do this because, X, Y, and Z is happening for this. So you're letting the outside world dictate what you're choosing to do. You don't feel like you are in control of your own life, or your own whatever's happening in this boundary sphere. So if we're looking at what do you have control over, and I know it's an odd thing to talk about when we're looking at power exchange relationships for S types, like, well, usually I'm gifting you control. You still have control over yourself, inside of yourself. So 3 spheres of control. What can you control? You can do your thoughts, beliefs, values, your actions, how you dress, what you eat. All of this is in your control. And if you are gifting this control to somebody else, you are still saying, here you go. I know I have this control, but I am gifting it to you in a power exchange relationship. And that's an understanding in a contract. Then you have the sphere of what you can influence. So you can give your opinions, you can give your thoughts, and they may sway influence on certain things, or they may not. And then everything else is outside of your control. I tell people, really just worry about what's in that little red ring, what is in the sphere of, or what can you control? Like, what can you actually do? And even when we're looking at these options for like control and what we're choosing for boundaries, sometimes we resist the simplest solutions to our boundary issues, such as changing ourselves, because we're hurt and we're angry and we think someone else needs to do the changing. And perhaps in some situations, that's completely true. And also that limits the options. Often changing ourselves is a valid option. So the point is, we give our power away, just like in power exchange when we're making that agreement. Here the S type is gifting to the D type, and as well as the D type is gifting protection and taking that control for the S type. When we allow others to dictate, our needs and what we're needing, or what things need to be met. Changing a thought from I have to I choose to. I like to say, you really don't have to do anything. Everything is a choice. I choose to go to work. I choose to show up in this relationship. I chose to volunteer myself for this webinar, and I chose to show up. I could have easily have said, nope, not going to do it. And then whatever happens from those consequences would happen. And this comes from like Rosenberg's like empowered versus victimization. If you change I have to I choose to, you're going from a victim mindset to a more empowering mindset. Like, I'm choosing to do this today. And understanding yourself, the reason you're choosing an option. So understanding why we are making this choice is very important. Maybe we're giving control over because we like that sense of somebody else having those reins. Or if we are a D type, We like receiving that gift of control and power because we enjoy protecting, or we enjoy service, or we enjoy inflicting pain, and someone is gifting that to us. So implementing boundaries. And these are all questions to look at, and we'll go over. You need to create a plan and a timeline that will help you be accountable and increase the likelihood of carrying out your plan. So this could be, we're going a formal sit down. We're going to look at a contract. We're going to look at boundaries. We're going to discuss this relationship, or we're going to discuss this scene that we're going to do. Yes, even pick up play scenes, you need to have a boundaries and limits negotiation. That is super important because, again, we're doing what is emotional, physical safety, spiritual safety, and all the other ways to keep us safe. So creating this plan, what will you do to set this boundary? It could be we're just going to sit down and talk, or it could be we're not going to, I like to verbalize it or write it down, but sometimes when we're enforcing a boundary, if the relationship isn't important, we're just like, nope, not going to do that, not going to engage in that. Describe the action you will take and the words you will use to communicate your boundary issue to others. So being very specific on what that language looks like to you. When will you do this? What action or change, if any, do you need to request from the other person? What will you do if others resist, ignore, or respond with anger to your boundary? How will you know whether your boundary is effective? What is the timeline? When will you know? Are there any obstacles? And what are those obstacles? What will help you with those obstacles? So what's going to help you overcome those barriers to whatever boundary we're looking to set? Timing is important when we're setting a boundary because we don't want to set them in anger. We don't want to set them with haste. We want to be very intentional about how we are setting a boundary. And once it's in place, you may need to fine tune it a little bit because boundaries are ever evolving things, just like contracts and documents, wills, things like that. Those are living documents, which means they are changing. And that's the same with boundaries. They are ever evolving and changing. So when we're fine tuning them, you have to identify what is the boundary you tried to set. What worked with this boundary? It could be a lot of things. It could be nothing, or it could be anything in between the spectrum. What did not work about this boundary? What needs are you trying to meet with this boundary? So again, it's re-identifying that need. Were your needs met? So the Likert scale, that's what we call when we're doing like a scale from 1 to 10. So it could be 10, it really worked out. 1, it didn't, or vice versa, however you want to look at the scale. But on the scale, where did it fall? Did it create a positive feeling? So do you feel good about this boundary? Is it creating the feelings that you were wanting to have about this boundary? Sense of safety, the sense of connection, or not? So then we look at this more closely and see where we need to tweak it a little bit, or maybe it doesn't need to be tweaked. So there are going to be possible I can talk today. There are going to be possible pitfalls when we're setting boundaries, and it's to be mindful of them. For one, not following through. So that could be on either side. That could be you not following through with the consequence or communicating the boundary. Misidentifying needs and feelings. We make mistakes. We could possibly get the need wrong, or we could get the emotion that we're trying to seek or that we're feeling not quite right, because sometimes anger can mask hurt, can mask fear. So we have to look at we have to narrow it down on what exactly is going on. Not getting cooperation from the other person. That is highly possible. Giving up too soon. So not being able to sit down with the person and reconnecting and trying to make this work. If this relationship, this partnership, or whomever we're trying to set this with is worth having. How to communicate boundaries. I like to use the dear man form of communication. There are several other ways that hit on very similar aspects. So what are we doing when we're communicating? For one, people are not mind readers. Whoever we're playing with or whomever we're engaging in a power exchange lifestyle with, they can't read our minds as much as we would like for them to, or we would like to read their minds. We don't have that power. And if you do, that's awesome. I would really like to know where you got it from. So if we're looking at Dear Man, it's a whole acronym. DBT, which is dialectical behavioral therapy, is full of them. So we're going to look at describe, which is using what's going on. So we're going back to this is at the very beginning when we were saying that I need this to feel this when this happens. So that's a very cut and dry template. And this is the outcome of what I would like. So we outline the situation in a non-judgmental language. Identify the facts that will support your request, your reason for saying no, or your need for a boundary. I didn't put that slide in here, but no is a boundary and it is a complete sentence. And I can go into other ways of saying no in a little bit. E is express. So share your opinions and your feelings if they relate and will help others to understand the situation and the boundary and need that you're trying to get across. Sometimes you may choose not to include this step. And that's okay. Sometimes more clarification is needed. So assert. Ask clearly for what you want or need, or if you're saying no, or when you're setting this boundary. Establish these goals for yourself up front. That's what that outcome is that we were talking about when we're creating a boundary and trying to identify it for ourselves. What are we wanting? What is the goal of setting this boundary? And we need to express that goal. Like, hey, this is the outcome. This is the goal of having this conversation. And the work can be more straightforward and matter of a fact. And the assert step is essential. Otherwise, no one's going to really know what you want. Again, we go back to that wishy-washy of we're not mind readers. So being able to assert this is my need and this is how it can get met. Reward or reinforce. Letting others know what this will give them. What's the purpose of setting the boundary? For one, I will feel safer being in a scene with you, especially if we're setting up for a power exchange. I will feel safer if, you're able to have reassurance, or if I'm able to know I when I say red, or when I say whatever, Neil Patrick Harris, which was a safe word of ours a long time ago, if I say that, I know you're going to stop. And that helps me feel safe and engaging in this activity with you. So you can repeat these limits and these requests, being that that is the wrong. So rewind. Try to focus on rewards rather than threats, rather than saying, here's what the consequences are going to be, even though you do need to express those later on in the conversation. I'm doing this because I want to feel more connected and I want to feel safe, or whatever the outcome you're wanting to be. So again, this is not a demand and it's not an ultimatum. Being mindful. So what I was getting into is the broken record approach. If the boundary is being crossed or it's not being respected, you're going to have to be a broken record and go back, depending upon which boundary it is. It could be several times, hey, I've told you you can't show up early for this because of X, Y, and Z. or the door will be locked, this, that, and the next thing, just so we're being that broken record. Because when you start setting boundaries with people and you have not set them before, they're not used to it. So there's going to be some pushback. Either usually it's subconscious, but sometimes it is conscious, like we're going to push those boundaries to see if you're actually going to enforce them. Pure confident, so be assertive. Being able to, you don't want to be aggressive and you don't want to be passive. You're wanting to be assertive or pure confident. This way it's like, no, I'm really serious about this. This is what I need for this to happen. And I go into some of these others in different webinars that I've done. I'm giving like a real quick run through. And negotiation. So negotiation is a buzzword in BDSM and the power exchange lifestyle. It's meaning that we're taking both persons' points of view and needs and consideration into consideration. So how can we get these needs met in this negotiation or collaboration? And I would stress that for certain boundaries are hard boundaries, or they're deal breaker boundaries, which we don't negotiate on, or hard limits that are not negotiable right now. Some boundaries can be negotiated, and it's going to depend on the relationship. Like, is this relationship important enough to consider this negotiation and collaboration? So I did give a snippet scene from the 50 Shades of Grey when they sit down to go over the contract, which we're not even going to get into my opinion on 50 Shades of Grey. But anyway, they're sitting down, they're looking at the contract, saying what are hard limits, what are soft limits, what they will and will not engage in. That scene was okay. It didn't go into like the full extent of what's going on, but they are, at that point, they are negotiating what this power exchange relationship will look like. What are my boundaries? What are the rules? What are the rituals? What are the hard limits and soft limits? And understanding that sometimes the communication is going to fail. This is not a hard, fast way to communicate at all. And sometimes people aren't interested in communicating or receiving or understanding the boundary. And that will be a choice that you are going to have to make if they're not willing to listen, what you are going to do at that point. Like, what's the consequence? And that leads us to boundary violations. So when your boundaries are ignored or not taken seriously. So trying to use the dear man strategy or the non-aggressive communication strategies, you're going to have to respond to violations assertively, which is passive could be you're not going to address it at all, or aggressive, you're responding in anger, ultimatums, and demands, which both of those aren't such great ways. They are ways, but they're not great ways of expressing a boundary violation has happened. Being like, hey, remember we set down that when I would safe word, all play would stop and we would discuss what was going on. And if they violated that, like say I said red, and they continued the scene, that's going to start breeding mistrust in a sense of this isn't a safe place for me anymore. That is definitely a boundary violation. That is a serious boundary and consent violation. So what do we do when our boundaries are violated besides saying, hey, this violated my boundaries? So what are the consequences to boundary violations? They are not punishments, and they're looked at different ways to protect yourself. So consequences versus punishment. Consequences for crossing a boundary is not a punishment. Boundaries are set to keep us safe. If the boundary is crossed, we need to find a different way to protect ourselves. Remember that this is a a gray area, the best way to know the difference is to ask yourself this particular question: how will this consequence help me protect and take care of myself? So with the example of not respecting the safe word, one consequence could be, I'm not going to engage in this with you anymore, depending upon if they were a pickup play partner or if they were a part-time play partner. If it was a 24/7 type of power exchange, or we have it in the bedroom and we live together, or we have a very serious power exchange lifestyle going on, and the safe word was violated, we are going to have a lot of conversations about trust and how to repair with that. And that's a whole other class on repairing. So what's wrong with punishing someone who's violated my boundaries and has treated me poorly? Because it is totally a valid question. Wanting to retaliate is completely understandable. It feels powerful. It feels like self-protection, but it rarely is. Often it puts you in more danger because it keeps the conflict going. And you fail to resolve the original issue, and you create more distance and animosity in your relationship. So on the flip side, enforcing the consequence is assertive, and you're standing up for yourself in a way that respects you and the other person. So enforcing consequences. Do not make these decisions from a flooded mind state or headspace. When I say flooded, what I mean is the sense of overwhelm. It could be anger, it could be sadness, it could be high anxiety and irritability, it could be hurt that you're feeling. When we are engaged, because this starts engaging the fight or flight system in our brain. And when our fight or flight is engaged with these big emotions, our thinky parts don't work so well. So the headspace that we have, like our prefrontal cortex, making logical decisions, they're not going to be logical when we're in a flooded headspace. It could be for certain things, like we need to stop this activity and I'm going to walk away until I am grounded, and then I will re-engage. And that could be as little as 10 minutes. It could be as long as an hour or a day, but it's setting that limit of, I can't engage in this at this moment. Deciding whether you may or may not want to verbally state the consequence. There are certain relationships that you won't be stating the consequence. You could be around a new group of people in a club or in a private party or in a house, or someone that you just met and are starting to see what's going on. And if certain red flags appear or certain crossing of your personal boundaries start happening, you may not even need to tell them. You just say, okay, no, we're good. I'm not going to engage in this anymore. And in other relationships, verbally stating it is needed. And that is going to depend on the intensity of the relationship. And this is going to put you in difficult situations sometimes. So sometimes we will set certain boundaries. A big one is sometimes we lose a lot when we want to enforce consequences for boundary violations, or we need to enforce them. So in some relationships, it's easy to say, I'm going to leave a relationship if my partner cheats on me. However, in reality, what do you lose? You can lose financial security. You can lose a home. You can lose a support system, a plethora of other things. So it's taking the totality of what's going on. In some situations, we accept our needs aren't going to be fully met. And some boundaries, and also understanding that some boundaries are deal breakers. So again, we're looking at those hard limits, soft limits, what's negotiable and what is not. The consequences can be high stakes, but the cost of doing nothing, so not setting the boundary and not being assertive, could be even higher, especially when we allow people to violate our deal breaker / hard limits. We pay with self-respect, we pay with safety, we pay with health, and we pay with our self-esteem. So, given this really brief run through of boundaries, how to implement them, what happens when they're violated, and how it relates to power exchange, BDSM, relationships, and lifestyles, do you have any questions, or would you like me to elaborate further on anything? Might help if we turn on. Okay, so you can actually type in chat now. This is a good question. What if a S-type starts giving and taking back the gift of control as punishment in a way to manipulate behavior? That's a great question, because that is emotional manipulation. So then we need to start looking at what is the need. If you're taking back this gift of control, why are we taking it back? What was violated? If it's just purely to punish, to me, that's a red flag in that dynamic. And we need to explore that further. Because that, to me, that feels really icky, like emotional blackmail in a way of taking it back as a way to almost top from the bottom. And topping from the bottom is when an S-type is doing certain behaviors to control a D-type's actions. Let me know if I need to elaborate further on that particular question. While you're typing, or if you have any questions, this is my contact information. My email is therapistnicki@harmonyusinc.com. My Twitter handle is @therapistnicki. Instagram is the same. My website is harmonyusinc.com. I'm happy to answer any questions. If you'd like a copy of this PowerPoint, just email me and I'm happy to send it to you. I know Pineapple Support is recording this, so it might be on their YouTube channel at some point if you're wanting to rewatch this. Particular references that I used a lot more, but these were really heavy. The Better Boundaries workbook that just came out from Sharon Martin. You can't see it because the screen. Maybe, there we go. Oh, before it flicks out, no. Yeah, it looks like this. It is on Amazon. It's not very expensive. It outlines everything, a lot of things that I've said and other things as well. Like if we're looking at boundaries at work, if we're looking at boundaries with family and extended family, difficult individuals. It's in this book. I also used Lane Pertson's expanded dialectical behavioral therapy skills training, which looks like this. And I used the Clinician's Guide to Working with Kinky Clients that was done by one of my mentors, Dr. Patsy Evans. It's no longer available on Amazon, but it's floating somewhere in the Ethernet sphere. But I work with a lot of stuff from like the Gottman style as well as transactional analysis for my clients. And I thank you all for being present and any questions that you have. If you had any additional ones, again, you can shoot me an email or get me through Instagram or through Twitter. So I appreciate all of your time today, and I can't wait to give another webinar. All right, I'm going to sign out now. Bye, everyone.